Hi guys, this is Brianna, Amanda, and Laura's demo for one of our lessons. This is lesson 4 out of 5. It's continuing from the first lesson that we did. Again, it's an 8th grade ENL class with former L students, multi-language learners, and many diverse students. They are reading the novel Inside Out and Back Again in ELA. And this particular lesson is enabling them to build their background knowledge and make connections to the country of Vietnam in nonfiction texts to the historical fiction novel Inside Out and Back Again by Brianna. So in lessons 1, 2, and 3, they would have already read some poetry, diary entries by a little girl named Ha, who's just entering the war in 1975 and discovering who she is and what it's like to be in war. As soon as the students walk in, they will see this on the smart board where they would write their table of contents, making connections and building background knowledge. And the table of contents would be history of the wars in Vietnam. There's also some translations in Spanish and in Bengali. The target for the next 2 periods would be we can make connections to Inside Out and Back Again in the Vietnam's wars by working in groups and holding an academic conversation. So students are visually able to see the bolded words in the target so they can pick up on that more easily. It's also very specific to what they'll be doing today. The Do Now, they will be working out of their expeditionary workbook from Engage New York. They should have their homework out. And then they will be assigned sections according to groups. So they're not entitled to close read it so diligently in the beginning, but they would skim and scan to get the gist of their section of the Vietnam Wars. Again, the objectives or the learning targets are translated for visuals on the bottom of the screen. Then they will prepare to watch a model of how a teacher might decode and skim and scan their section in 5 minutes, pick out some unfamiliar words, and get the gist of the article. Students would not be reading such a long text, it would be 1 to 2 paragraphs for each section. So, the academic conversations that they want to keep in mind is that they will be having a conversation on what connections do they see between Ha's situation and what they read in the non-fictional article, The Vietnam Wars. So, you want to keep mentioning this question to them so they understand what their purpose is for reading and how they should be talking to one another. So, for the model in the Vietnam Wars, according to Expeditionary Learning and Engage New York, the teacher would model the first section, which is titled The Chinese Dragon. The teacher would, of course, start with the top over here to make sure that you don't skim across that, who the author's name is, the title, The Chinese Dragon, how the teacher may feel about it, and look at the timeline, noticing that that it's starting BC to AD. So basically, the teacher would go over the things that close readers do, how they would pick apart these words and create a gist. The overall gist here is that China tried to invade the Vietnam country, and they did for a while. But Vietnam ended up retaliating, and there was actually someone called the Trunk Sisters, 2 females who committed suicide rather than surrender, and that seemed to be an ongoing theme in this particular reading. That women were warriors, the men were warriors, and they'd rather give up their life than surrender. So here's a visual of the Trunk Sisters. They rode on elephants, and students would like to see this picture and see if it's how they imagined it in their heads of these fearless women riding on elephants is just such an elegant and intriguing picture. So each group will be assigned to do basically a jigsaw or home protocol and a home combined with a home and expert. So it is a long article. It's a little difficult. However, if it's divided in sections and students are able to teach one another what they've learned, they would be cutting a lot of time and learning from one another, which is what we want them to do, is be able to hold that language academic conversation and advance their literacy skills. So one is called The Fall of the French. Another one is Everything Tends to Ruin. And another one is Life, Liberty, and Ho Chi Minh. So in this home expert jigsaw protocol, again, the question that they're keeping in mind is what connection do they see between high situation and the information read in the article. Um, they will be working with their groups. They will be assigned roles for GIST and filling out their graphic organizers and preparing to go to other groups and learn from one another and fill out their graphic organizer based on what they learned from the other groups. This is a little something what the workbook looks like. And in closure, you would wrap it up, and the teachers would talk about the author's perspective on the Vietnamese people. He admires them. There's a lot of word choices here that shows that he thinks they are warriors, they are fearless, and even though they are a very small country, they've been countries have tried to overtaken them numerous times, including the French, China, Americans, and the Vietnamese people came out on top all the time. They were thought to be the underdogs. However, they were trained in the jungle, and it was their territory, and they were able to overcome. So hopefully students will be able to make inferences that in Ha's country that America would not overtake Vietnam, and that the Vietnamese people would come out on top, although they went through struggles. And as they read more about the 1975 war in Vietnam and America, they will gain a better understanding and gain empathy with one another. So, what have they learned about the Vietnamese people in history, and what can they basically predict will happen with Ha? Okay. Um, for homework they will study the poems and the novel Inside Out and Back Again, and write down one or two questions to bring into class for understanding. Um, this is going to help them with the summative assessment that they will be taking for lesson 5, which is reading the ending of the Vietnam War article titled Doc Lap at Last, which means liberty at last. So after all the struggle, liberty was finally declared for Vietnamese people, and they would be reading that on their own, cold, and writing an assessment, making connections to Ha. So this lesson, lessons 1, 2, 3, and especially 4, will help them gain knowledge for their summative assessment to be able to do it on their own without all the additional support. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson and have a great night.